Great. So thank you for joining us for PhD Pathways Conversations in Analytics. And I want to welcome our guest today, Adrienne Block, who has a PhD in Earth and Environmental Sciences and is Director of Workforce Analytics and Innovation at Mastercard. And Adrienne, I'm going to let you do the rest of your introduction so that you can tell everyone a little bit more about what you do in your current role.
Yes. Sorry. I'm having a lot of reflection on my glasses, and I wish I could solve that problem, but I can't. Apologies. So I have actually been in people analytics for about the last 7 years. It's a field that I entered by accident. I will say I previously held a similar role at Chevron, and then I entered the workforce directly out of my PhD into subject matter expertise in that role. And then through organizational restructuring and, the cost of oil hit $26 in February of 2016. And Chevron made a lot of choices about its workforce. And one of the choices was a reduction in headcount. And during that time, I ended up moving into this analytics role. But the thing that drew me into it was that one of the things I've always loved about earth science, about field research, about all aspects of it was data. And a lot of times we were the first people to study an area. We were really working in frontier spaces. I did a lot of research in Antarctica during my time at Columbia and in my undergrad. And so, honestly, like having that first look of data, never having enough data, because you are there first, was some of the things that I really loved, just always getting into it, challenging your own thinking, and really thinking about what's next. Were some of the opportunities that I saw in the people analytics space. Because when I came out of school, it was not something people talked about, wasn't really a known field. I tell people that if I'd known about it, I probably would have been very interested in it, because it's this wonderful intersection of how people think and how they realize their values. So there's sort of like a lot of like decision science and economics, things like that. That play into how people make decisions. And so I love studying that from that perspective. Sorry, I will, Rachel, admit that I got a tiny bit distracted by my flare. And so I feel like I haven't quite addressed the question that you asked me, but let me know.
Yeah, no, that's great. I didn't know that you had done research in Antarctica. That's very, very cool and kind of funny to be in a place with no population and not doing people analytics. But can you say just, a little bit more, I guess, about what people analytics is and what you're actually doing, kind of what the field is, and then on like day to day, what you do?
Yeah. So I think the people analytics field, it's actually diverse within itself, right? So there's a number of different ways that you can support an organization. So within Mastercard, we have a structure where we have people who are supporting particular business units, regions, and those folks, they do a range of activities around the initiatives, around cost control, for example, like location strategy and understanding where the workforce should be available and capable of taking on the roles or evolving the roles. Influencing decisions like whether we should build talent internally or buy talent from the external market, and understanding the implications of that over a 5-year timescale. Estimating things like future headcount or the amount of workforce that we need, or how to create capacity in that workforce through strategic workforce planning. A lot of that has become increasingly numerical and future looking. So I think at some point, organizations within our own organization, we were, when I joined, looking at the end of the year, and we've just started to build capabilities where we're looking at 2 and 3 years ahead. My prior employer, Chevron, we actually looked 10 years ahead, because the estimate of how long it took to go from being a master's degree or PhD student entering that workforce to actually be fully productive was 7 years. So clearly we had to have a continuous flow of talent that would support that business objective long term. My team and myself, I actually support the P&C organization. And then I support the organization, talent and organizational effectiveness that designs programs and solutions for the company. Everything from the annual performance cycle for our employees, the onboarding experience, how we reach out and hire people, designing that to optimize the experience. And especially recently, how do we leverage digital technologies to enhance that experience and make it much more like the experiences that people are used to when they, you download a new app, and that sort of ease of use. We want that within our organization for our employees, because it just establishes the culture of the organization as an innovative culture. It's amazing how if you have a lot of roadblocks in your processes or they're kind of clunky, people translate that into this organization's technology is way behind, right? It shapes how they feel about the organization. Another aspect is measuring culture, measuring sentiment. So it's really about that whole entire employee life cycle, how they get attracted to the organization, join, how they develop their careers, move around the organization, and the skills and agility that they bring to how they feel about where they work, right? That inspiration, that purpose is increasingly important, especially among Gen Z, whoop, whoop. And then, exiting employees, and how do you keep people engaged or like maintain a reputation, even if that job at that time wasn't the right fit, you still want them to feel really positive. So our measurement spans all of that, in addition to supporting things like planning and cost control and the day-to-day management of a 33,000 person workforce.
Wow. Okay, great. Thanks for that overview. So now going back in time, can you tell us about your transition from from your PhD to your first job after finishing, and then kind of your trajectory? You in your introduction, you said a little bit about gas prices hitting, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It was traumatizing, so I always remember it.
Yeah.
So I joined Chevron directly out of my PhD. I didn't know that's where I was going to go. I got pretty close to the end of my PhD, and for personal reasons, sort of my ability to wait for like the stability that you get with a full-time job. My tolerance for like academics, like, oh, here's another position, and then you'll have to keep applying for another position, just for personal reasons, that had kind of shifted. I was a little wary of the research path at that point. And so I actually had an offer for a postdoc and an offer for a job at the same time, and had to make a decision between the two. And I ended up choosing the job for personal reasons. And so I joined in a group that was directly in my area of expertise, kinds of measurement, geophysical technology that I had used to write my dissertation and to explore Antarctica and Greenland. So it was right in my wheelhouse. But what I found was that the work wasn't like the questions weren't varied. I felt like I was answering the same question over and over again. And whether or not that question was of value or of use wasn't up to me, right? Like the full scale impact of my work was determined by things like politics in Brazil and cost of land and all these other things that I couldn't control, didn't see into, didn't have influence over. And so a lot of times it felt like I was shelving work, for legacy's sake. I honestly, and some of that is just, what projects there are at a time. And, as an earth scientist, you don't decide whether or not the earth is interesting in a certain place, right? Whether or not it has those oil and gas reserves. I have no control over that. But that seemed to be influencing my career and controlling me. So I got into recruiting for the Earth Sciences department, I think in part just because I really enjoyed talking to people, understanding what motivated them and how they connected their passions to their work. So things like career fairs where college students would come, and you'd have this pile of, hundreds of resumes, and you very quickly have to scroll through that and identify people who you think would be the best fit for the organization. You have on the spot interviews with them, and then you've got to think about where in the organization they would go. And I loved that. I also really enjoyed, when we would have PhD candidates for jobs come and visit. I don't know why, but I joke, I talked to every female PhD candidate for a whole year. A lot of free lunches. And I really enjoyed that experience, again, connecting the passion and the science to what it means for the company and what it means for that person in terms of their career. So it was obvious to me I was really invested in this sort of recruitment aspect of our department, both from thinking about the sustainability of the department and long-term what we needed to be successful, and also thinking about the people, right? Your job is such a big influence on your quality of life, what it means for your family, all the people around you. So connecting people to what I'll now call priceless possibilities really was, something I enjoyed. So as the price of gas went down and I was on a research project that got cut entirely, and someone suggested that I cast a wide net and look for places I could use my analytical skills. And Chevron at the time had posted roles in analytics in HR for the first time. They just weren't finding those deep technical skills within the existing HR skill sets. So they wanted to hire people from engineering, people from earth science. They brought one of each of us in to really elevate the level of analytics within the organization and start driving a culture of a data-centric culture.
Wow, great. And I guess, so picking up on that, what technical skills have you needed or are needed in your field?
Yeah, great question. It's so basic. And it's funny because I feel like I have to step outside myself to think about that a little bit. But I remember sitting down for the interview internally at Chevron for the role. And one of the questions they asked me is, how much code can you write? And I said, however much I've needed before. Because as a PhD, you learn through your project work, right? Of course, you have your coursework, but then at some point you're working on your own project. And whatever the problems are that come up in that space, you're solving them or you're partnering to solve them. So that was my honest answer. I can write as much code as I've needed to write before, and sort of what platforms there were, and just the general sense of not being intimidated by that and wanting to be engaged in continuous learning was something that was important to the interviewer and resonated with them as I spoke about it. So other skills that are useful in my space are statistics, right? Your knowledge of statistics, your ability to, parse things out. I think one of the things about people analytics that's particularly important is that you're often working with an audience that wants data, but isn't native to data. And that is something I do see changing, and that could change particularly over the next 5 to 10 years. But if you're continuously speaking to people who are not native to data, then these are people who are really great at designing processes and programs and all of that sort of stuff, running with it. Amazing skills actually within HR. But you have to be able to translate those results into something very digestible for them. So it's a matter of starting at the beginning and developing hypotheses, gathering the data that you need, recognizing when you're not going to get the data that you need, really truly understanding the problem to get all of that out. And then the last step of any project that we do is make it simple. So how do I make this simple? Similar to how, as a PhD, like you might be writing your dissertation in this very technical language, but if you're going to go and speak to a school group or an outside community group about what you do, you have to make it simple, right? You have to understand your audience and bring it to their level.
Great.
So I would say, yeah, statistics, curiosity, ability to boil things down. Those are some of the really, really important skills. I would say synthesis is one of the things that really differentiates where people sit within our organizational levels, is your ability to start with that big funnel and then synthesize to those key messages.
Great. So I think this is the last question that I'll ask, and then we'll open it up to the students who are here, which I guess it's 2 parts. One is looking back on your time in graduate school, are there things that you did to advance your career and professional development that ended up really helping you? But then also the reverse, are there things you wish you had done but didn't do?
Sometimes Sometimes I wish I'd written more code because I feel like I always perpetually feel behind on sort of like machine learning technologies and the actual like implementation of them. That being said, I think that experiment design, and particularly in the frontier space that I studied, you would never have all the data that you wanted. So that ability to think about what's next and to really challenge your own thinking, like with this limited data, is this really the best conclusion? Those are some of the fungible skills and the things that I got to practice in every project that I did that I think I carry with me today. I think experiment design in particular turns out to be one of my strengths. Just thinking about if you're going to benchmark one population against another, how you should do that, both with the statistical measure and with the design of who really is that right benchmark population. Being able to establish things you can control and things you can't, and really good proxies. I think I had to do a good bit of thinking about things in terms of proxy. Like I don't have exactly what I need, but this is the closest thing. And, using context and research from other studies to develop those proxies. Those are some of the skills and the experiences that I still carry with me. And then I guess I wish that machine learning had been a bigger topic. It's something that I think it's amazing how profoundly available it is now. We have something called AutoML, and I love AutoML because I'm like, oh, I don't even have to remember the syntax for these things, right? If I design a good experiment, it can help me out so much. But I also feel like some of the very fundamental understanding of different statistical machine learning concepts that you get by living in that space are things that I feel like I'm still kind of catching up on. So the pervasiveness of those sort of technologies, I wish I could go back and apply that like over 10 years. I can't imagine how wonderful it would be to sort of be a machine learning native at this point. But no, I feel like I sound old now. That's the wishful thinking of someone who's graduated a decade ago. So
I mean, that field has changed so much in that time too.
so, yeah.
Yeah. Great. Are there any other, I guess kind of a follow-up to that too is with machine learning, and then I guess like with anything else, would that have been something like you wish had been more, or even like kind of thinking about the students who are here and recommendations, is it like shaping a dissertation project or research project around that, or skill building and gaining experience outside of the actual research and dissertation project, or both?
I think it depends on the person and it depends on the opportunity. So one of the folks on the phone today mentioned like qualitative research, and like one of the things we deal with in people analytics all the time is that we get so much information that is textual, that is how people feel about things. And so how are you going to measure at scale how people feel about things from raw unformatted text, very qualitative data? Clearly that's a machine learning use case, machine learning application. And there's lots of tools and packages out there that will help you with that. I think the great advantage that we have now compared to a few years ago is just like the number of resources that are out there. There's really wonderful like deep machine learning courses from MIT and Stanford and things like that that are just available on YouTube. And you can start to think about how you could use those tools for the research question that you have. And then, of course, there's lots of free data samples and examples and things like that. So whether it's experimenting for your own curiosity to find out if those are the kind of questions you like to answer, and that's what's going to drive your curiosity and really put some fire in your belly in your work, versus actually trying to apply it to your project. I don't think it matters kind of what brings you to the table, but really just, starting with those existing resources before you have to spend any money, I think you can get a pretty good understanding of whether or not that's something that you really enjoy.
Great. Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to stop the recording. So we're going to open it up for questions.